Hello, everybody. Joe Bagadones here. Welcome back for another episode of Umineko. Last time, Alice got her fucking shit rocked. Like, bodied. Like, it wasn't even a fight. Well, it was until this, Beowulf, werewolf, like, fucking last remnant of the Age of Gods motherfucker showed up. Yeah, that's fair. Sometimes you just gotta take the L and live with it. But anyway, I'm tired. I just woke up, rolled out of bed, a little before I set my alarm, too. It's windy outside, and, like, my fence to my backyard, like, the gate blew open and, like, slammed against the rest of the fence and fucking shook me awake. So now I'm up with a nice cup of coffee, and, my lips and face hurt like a motherfucker. It's finally getting seasonably cold outside, except it's also, like, really windy. Like, a lot. Like, fucking 20, 30 mile an hour winds. Like, constantly. And last night, I was standing outside for most of the night, so... Like, my cheeks are sandblasted, my lips have turned to, like, fucking brittle leather. So hopefully I don't, like, split a lip when I'm recording this, but, fingers crossed! Let me take a nice sip of my coffee to limber up. And then we'll start to get rid of these annoying barking dogs. I accidentally hit the auto button when I was fiddling around trying to get OBS set up, so we advanced one line since we left off last time, so don't get confused. Alice's injuries were not limited to her abdomen. The wolf had punched a hole straight through to her back, crushing her lower vertebrae and leaving both of her legs paralyzed. Oh! Though her magic crest were repairing the damage, it would likely take another hour before recovery. At the very least, her heart and slender arms still worked. Although, after crawling along the ground to the phone booth, those too were failing her. As the crest healed her wounds, a searing heat ran through her body that threatened to overwhelm her. It was as if her body was no longer her own, like she was transforming into another creature. The poison throbbing through her open wounds hurt emotionally more than physically. She was used to pain, but she could not accept this disquieting feeling. Not that she had any intention to. The moment she did, it would be her last. Alice wrestled with the discomfort from her abdomen and her magic crest, and with her consciousness holding on by a thread, she took the phone in her hand. It was unlikely Aoko would be there to pick up. Even so, with the stray dogs gathering around the booth, she had to try. It was Sojiro who picked up. Alice knew she was better off just hanging up, but his name slipped out of her mouth. After pausing and fighting with herself for some time, the image of an innocent boy came to mind, and she hung up. Her instincts had won out. She could not let him get involved. Not just because he was an innocent bystander, it was more than that. To Alice, Sojiro appeared that day because he was merely living in the wrong place at the wrong time. Only the lightest of breaths passed her lips. Above her, the moon began to blur. Snow was falling again, so close yet so far. Dogs began hurling themselves at the phone booth to the chorus of hungry snarls. Thunk, thunk. She took one last deep breath and closed her eyes. Glass. An unusual material for a coffin. Unless you're like a communist demagogue, in which case they embalm you and put you on display. For the people. Odd thing to do, but you do you, I guess. But the girl knew, in the corner of her mind, that she had made the right choice not to ask the boy for help. Some time passed. A peculiar sight came into view. A field of white flowers. The clear sky was too blue. The flowers, so numerous they made the field look barren. The sight was so dazzlingly beautiful, she wished she could look away. This was probably all thanks to Father Winter. The cold wind carried a scent of paradise far removed, untainted by man or beast. It was a glimpse of the fields beyond winter. One could be forgiven for thinking they were the afterlife. Come to think of it, she remembered how funerals were sad, yet always beautiful. No, really not. I've been to many a funeral in my time during the honor guard. Some of them are in these little fucking shithole podunk cemeteries where like 5 people show up. They say a prayer and then they fucking dump the urn in the ground. Like, all right, we're done here. You see the full ray of the human experience going to those, and you can see how it can end pretty uneventfully, you know, if you know, no one cares for you or you don't care for anyone in the end. Fuck, we had one where the only person to show up was the guy's neighbor, like completely estranged from his family, loner. Dude was like 85 or whatever. Don't know his story, but you know, just his neighbor's like, fuck, that's too depressing. So he showed up, took the flag, and then we left. It was an odd experience. She cried. She made an incongruous whine, a sound of life. Her breathing was strained and erratic. Hollow and useless was the heat that she could once used to fend off pain. The heart. There was an R in there. It was as though she was in the space between a disconnected body and mind. A crying woman and a silent child. High was the sky, deep was the forest, unmoving were the people. No footsteps or voices of salvation came. Who was that looking innocently up at the sky in the stillness? When she came to, Alice was going up a familiar hill. The cold night air had all but frozen her hands or feet. She shook, as you would expect from someone whose abdomen had been torn apart.
Shizuki.
She could barely comprehend it that she was being carried slowly up Shiro Inuzuka. Sojiro had Alice on his back and was silently ascending the slope. His calm eyes seemed to be suffering from the bitter cold. He did not seem to be dressed for the time of year. Not even his coat. His exposed neck and hands were ice cold. Alice asked, still slumped over his frame. She tried to move, but to no avail. The last thing she wanted was to rest her entire weight on someone else.
瞳子さんから電話があった。アリスが危ないって。青崎はともかく、アリスは意地を張りすぎだ。あの状況で助けを呼ばないのはどうかしてる。そりゃ、自分が言っても何もできなかっただろうけど。
Sojiro spoke with a scolding tone, his eyes kept firmly ahead. His words were directed at himself rather than the girl on his back.
しずきくんは関係ないもの。
だろうね。けど、これで関係はできた。館に着いたら話してもらうぞ。
Sojiro focused on climbing the hill. The slope would get steeper from here to the mansion. The thought of Sojiro climbing this steep hill with her on his back surprised Alice.
降りるわ。もう大丈夫だ。
I wouldn't call your guts falling out fine.
お腹をむき出しでかい。この方が少しは暖かいよ。
Also that, don't want you to catch a cold.
それに、
Because apparently that's a Japanese thing. You sleep with your stomach
山じゃ
exposed.
この程度は朝飯前だから
That's
気
how
に
it
しないで
works,
くれ。
but-
息が上がっているのは公園まで急いだからだし。まあ、その意味はなかったんだが。
なぜ？
俺が着いたら犬はさっさと散っていった。初めから瞳子さんはそういうつもりだったんだ。アリスをどうにかするつもりもなければ時間制限もなかった。喜ぶべきことなんだろうけど。
Sojiro said dejectedly. But he was wrong. While Toko did not want to kill Alice per se, she would not have cared if she had died. At least, that was the way Alice saw it. She did not know how long it took Sojiro to get to the park, but if he had not come, the phone booth would have collapsed and she would be dead. Alice did her best to suppress her thoughts and feelings. She felt silly at the thought of correcting him, and it would matter little anyway. The thought of her trying to thank him was more painful than her open wounds.
もしかして公園からずっと
I mean, you look like you weigh 70 pounds. It's not that big a deal.
仕方ないだろう。電車終わってたんだから。タクシーを使えばよかったんだけど、あいにく持ち合わせがなくて。
Also, you would have to do the explaining of why you have like a mortally wounded girl on your back.
ほんと、今日ほどお金の不便さを思い知った日はない。
And just saying like, oh yeah, she got savaged by dogs. Like, pretty sure he would have just dropped you off at home. Taxi driver, that is. For the first time today, Sojiro let out a sigh. There was no point in taking a break. He'd already traveled close to 6 miles like this. Perhaps the fatigue was getting to him. Sojiro was more upset with his own weakness than the difficulty of the trek.
でもそれを言うならお金の大切さ
使えるものがあるのにお金がないだけで使えないんだから。それって不便って言わないか？
I mean, I guess. The innocence of his question made Alice briefly forget her pain. She too felt distant from the real world. But compared to the boy carrying her, she felt like a regular citizen.
何かあなたらしいわ
Alice smiled to herself. As Alice rested her head, something soft touched her cheek. The collar Aoko had given him.
館に着いたら着替えるんだ。お腹の血も拭って、落ち着いたら今で話そう。瞳子さんに言わせれば、俺もこれで敵らしいから。
With those words hanging in the air, they reached the top of the hill. The gate in the wood stood before them. Beyond it, illuminated by the pale moonlight, stood the mansion. Looking up at it, the girl felt a little disappointed. A natural reaction, yet she could not place where her sadness was coming from. She wanted to spend more time on his back. Once they entered the mansion, Alice slid off Sojiro's back and walked towards the West Wing. The West Wing was her domain. However, after only a few steps, she collapsed to the floor.
Alice!
Sojiro rushed over to her, but she raised her hand. Her gesture told him that he was not to come closer. He stopped in his tracks, a concerned look on his face. Her pale skin gleamed with sweat. Her expression uncharacteristically strained.
平気部屋に戻るぐらいの力が戻ったわ服を繕ってくるからあなたはここにいてすぐに戻ってくるからそうしたら
The pained look in Alice's eyes told Sojiro they would talk later. He knew he could not stop her. Sojiro reminded himself that she was the one in pain, not him.
それじゃあ戻ってきたら話を聞かせてくれ。
Alice took a deep breath before slowly disappearing down the corridor. An uneventful 5 minutes passed. Alice returned wearing a fresh set of black clothes, but her complexion remained pallid. With a small sigh, she carefully leaned against a pillar in the foyer and slid down until she was sitting.
アリス、傷が痛むなら無理せず横になった方がいい。
Sojiro sat across from her on the cold floor.
傷はもう痛まないわ横になる必要もないこの体の異常は七かまどを飲まされたせいだから
じゃあせめて毛布とか
いいから気遣いはしないで
You sure about that?
ここ
I mean, it's better to be warm than cold, usually. Just in general. She seemed to be telling the truth. Sojiro remembered Aoko telling him that as long as Alice is inside the mansion, she would be comfortable.
あったかいのならいい。それで七かまどっていうのは
I don't know, it's like a kind of tree, a berry.
薬草の一種よ 7回かまどで焼いても燃え残ることから付けられた名前で、紅葉は魔除け。
Sounds gross.
普通の人には良くない程度だけど、私や青子には少し厄介ね。体内での魔力生成そのものに抵抗されてしまうから手の打ちようがない。
You want some like Ipecac? Like get it out of your system?
毒と思っていいのか？
いえ、本来は薬草よ。
But you know, anything in certain quantities can be good or bad.
今は傷を治すために魔力を使っているから苦しいけど、傷が完治すればおとなしくなるわ。単純な話、七かまどを消化するまで私は役には立たないだけ。
Alice paused. She decided not to say how many days that would take.
別にしずきくんが心配することじゃないわ。こんなの血が流れる程度の痛みだから。
She worked hard to keep her calm tone. Aoko had barely blinked when she was struck in the back, so mages must have an unusually high pain threshold. Sojiro was surprised and bewildered by what she said. If wounds didn't count as long as the pain wasn't too bad, then nothing would hurt except an injury that kills you.
わかった。話をするのは明日にしよう。今日はとにかく体を休めてほしい。
明日になっても私の容体は変わらないけど。
いいんだ、それでも。アリスはもっと体を大事にしてくれ。
Yeah, it's been a long day. He stood up.
部屋まで送るよ。それとも今で休むか？西館には入ったことはないから、アリスの部屋もわからないし。
ここでいいわ。青子を待たなくちゃいけないから。
Alice looked up at the skylight. The moon illuminated her pained face. The foyer looked like it belonged to a run-down castle. Only the moon and Alice seemed more vivid than reality. Where did her strength come from? Magic. Sojiro stared at her, or I mean like, straight the will. Without understanding the significance of Alice's gaze, I choke. He turned his gaze to the night sky, powerless as it was. For the third time that night, the silence was broken by the sound of the phone ringing. Before Sojiro could move, a thin shadow bolted across the foyer. By the time he realized it was the weakened Alice, she had already taken the receiver in her hand.
Aoko.
It was the first time Sojiro had heard Alice sound concerned. Her tone was infinitely graver than when she was enduring her own pain. Alice's question received only a short response from the voice on the other end. It was a voice more frail than Alice's, like a flickering flame about to turn to smoke. We gotta fucking scrape her off the pavement too? The phone was far from Sojiro's ears, but the words he picked up were very unlike her. Despite saying so little, no, because she said so little, the weight of Aoko's defeat struck Sojiro hard. Alice silently set the receiver down. Only moments before, her body had been fighting the pain. Now it felt stronger than ever. It was like a scarecrow transforming into a beautiful stone statue. Huh? Seeing this, Sojiro finally understood. Alice's expression when she looked at the moon had come from her trying to accept an immutable reality. Took the fattest of L's. All right. Title drop. Chapter 11, Witch on the Holy Night 1. Well, it is Christmas. No, Christmas Eve. Is Christmas Eve technically like a religious holiday? I don't know. Aoko had not hung up, but the line remained silent. Alice set down the receiver, quickly put on her mantle, and made for the entrance, moving her injured body by sheer willpower alone. Along the way, she paused, then turned to Sojiro and looked directly at him.
青子に何かあったんだな。
Alice hesitated for a moment, before pushing aside her anxiety and grabbing his hand.
しずきくん、一緒に来て。
Yeah, we need your help carrying her.
待ってくれ。一緒にってどこに？
相田教会まで。青子の方はエイリ神父にお願いするしかないから。
They got a car we can borrow?
相田教会って病院の横にある。
そう。知っているのなら問題な
Well,
い
he's
わ
been
ね。
there before.
説明する手間も省けたわ。
Alice left the mansion and made her way down the tree-lined path. She was clearly determined, but the look in her eyes betrayed her pain.
アリス、連絡をするなら電話は？
Sojiro asked Alice, whose grip on his hand was light but unyielding.
教会の人にならもう知らせた。もしかして病院のことを言っているなら、それこそ無駄よ。ハイヤーなんて言うけど、空を飛ぶわけでもないし。今は
Alice had thought of everything. She turned to the mansion and lightly snapped her fingers. In response, a window opened and countless starlings took flight.
1番隊は索敵。2番隊と3番隊は現場に向かって応急処置を。在庫切れになってもいいわ。まだ生きているなら、青子の心臓を止めないで。
Alice commanded the birds firmly.
しずきくんは裏庭から青子の自転車を持ってきて。
It's illegal to ride double. Sojiro let slip his discomfort at the thought of that thing. The custom-made red bicycle. When he was cleaning the incinerator, Aoko had verbally assaulted him for nearly scratching it.
いいけど、どうするつもりなんだ？
Sojiro know how to ride a bike? Probably not. Do you know how to ride a bike?
ここにいるより、
Would you be
教
able to
会にいた
pedal?
方がしずきくんは安全よ。それに、私も急がないといけない。しずきくん、二人乗りできる？
That's a non-answer. He'd seen others ride tandem and was confident he could do it. Only, it was the bicycle that concerned him. Ah, well, he does make deliveries for his part-time job, so... His frame was so light, Sojiro was unsure it could support both of their weights.
二人乗りってことは、アリスが後ろに乗るのか？
Not quite.
できないなら、いいわ。
Alice turned away as if to snub him, then began walking. Unfortunately for Sojiro, he was now on her bad side.
いや、そういう意味じゃないんだ。アリスとはイメージが合わなかったから。
Does it have like a luggage rack on the back he can sit on? Ignoring his pleas, she continued briskly towards the woods. There was no way she was going to ride the bike now. Sensing her stubborn streak, he desperately called out to her.
待った。今のはこっちが悪かった。すぐに持ってくるから、怒るのはつけにしておいてくれ。
Alice stopped. As soon as he saw her stop, he hurried to the rear courtyard. He grabbed the key from where it was hanging and used it to unlock Aoko's bicycle. One of my windows is rattling in the wind. Great. It's fun to listen to that. By the time Sojiro brought it back to the front of the mansion, Alice was continuing towards the forest.
アリスの性格、なんとなくつかめてきたな。
Muttering to himself, he straddled the bike. He rested his foot on a pedal, felt light but sturdy. Confident the bike could support his weight and Alice's, he began pedaling.
アリス！
She turned as he called out to her, before shooting him a piercing glare.
行こう。後ろの荷台に乗ってくれ。でもクッションがないから痛いと思う。
私は大丈夫よ。しずきくんが嫌じゃなければの話だけど。
I mean, it's gonna be downhill for a good part of the fucking ride. He had hit the nail on the head. Alice definitely held a grudge over the smallest things.
そういうことなら問題ないよ。アリスが後ろにいてくれるのは嬉しい。それで、行き先は間教会でいいんだな。
Unabashed and undaunted, he plowed on. His tone seemed to ease Alice's mood. She nodded calmly and took a seat on the luggage rack above the rear tire.
手を回すけど、私が触れても平気。
Well, it's
大丈夫だよ。
important to
体力があるのは
maintain the
さっき
center
証
of
明
balance
した
of
だ
the
ろ。
bike. So you better hold on to him. Alice silently wrapped her arms around Sojiro. Once she held on tightly enough, he gripped the handlebars.
よかった。
He said quietly.
何が良かったの？
Sojiro turned to her, an ambiguous expression on his face, and then began pedaling vigorously. He let go of the brakes, and the bicycle hurled down Shiro Inuzuka's steep incline. Look at me just putting wrong syllables. Surprised by the sudden speed, Alice gasped and clutched Sojiro tighter. Let's just fucking bomb the slope, it's fine. She wanted to protest, but stopped when she saw the serious expression on Sojiro's face. Instead, she decided to tighten her grip. Under the night sky, a young girl had put her faith in a young boy. So there's snow on the ground, so please be careful. Faster than a roller coaster, the bicycle hurtled towards Misaki Town Station. Around the station, there was no sight of cars or people. While the town slept under its snowy blanket, two people were racing like the wind. The boy spoke.
本当によかった。二人乗りが思ったより簡単で。
That's not too bad. But he was alone in his relief. It was their first bicycle ride together, and they spent it speeding down an empty highway. The boy's words were lost to the howling wind, fortunately. That was a fucking breaking sound. You do an Akira slide? Jesus Christ. In spite of the late hour, there were still lights on in the church. Originally, the only light at this time of night came from the entrance to the sleepless hospital, ever vigilant and ready to receive patients. However, this was a quiet town with little nightlife. The hospital saw perhaps one emergency patient per night, however, and it was not equipped to handle tonight's sole patient. It was a little before 1 o'clock in the morning. Leaving the bicycle outside, the two headed into the church. With its snow-covered roof, the church looked like it was wearing a white hat that lit up the darkness. Interesting analogy. In the entrance stood a tall shadow.
Kuonji-san.
Nice cape, dumbass. The man's voice was placid. Dressed in a long coat, he had been waiting for Alice.
エイリ神父、青子は？
Seems rather young.
ユイカが見ています。私が駆けつけた時には手遅れでした。青崎の家に伝令を願いたいのですが。
青子はそれを望まないわ。それに、あちらも今は城に囚われているそうです。
Huh?
今夜の相手は、真っ先に青子の祖父の動きを封じたようですから。
Alrighty then. The two exchanged pleasantries. You call those pleasantries? Sojiro did not move from the foot of the stairs.
おや、そちらは。
Though the father seemed calm, his words had an edge to them. As if to protect Sojiro from his gaze, Alice stepped between them.
彼は青子の使い魔。契約はまだなされていないけれど。
I guess that's one way to define the relationship.
使い魔ってアリス。
Yeah, look, he's even wearing a collar. Sojiro was about to complain, but Alice shot him a fiery gaze. That all but said, just shut up and play along.
そうですか。そのような申告はありませんでしたが、届けが遅れたのは不問としましょう。 外部の魔術師と交戦中でしたからね。あなたたちはその撃退を最優先にしたということで。
Alice nodded in thanks.
では通ります。彼の同行を許可しなさい。
ご自由に。私はこれより朝廷に向かいます。管理者が変わるのなら両教会への資料を用意しなければいけませんので。ああ、留守中はリツカに任せてありますから、必要なものがあれば彼女に。
As if passing the baton, Father... what is that, Airy? I'm just gonna go with Airy. Because I'm pretty sure the I after the E is like a long... It's like a long vowel. Airy exited the church. I'll have to hear his name a couple more times. Sojiro took 2 full steps back to give him a wide berth. The priest had a dignified air about him. To put it bluntly, he was strikingly beautiful. Straight nose, glistening lips. Not a single imperfection on his mildly effeminate face. But that only went as far as his appearance. His manner lacked any hint of softness or grace. Just by looking at him, you could tell he was dependable, like tempered steel, despite being somewhat unapproachable. The priest disappeared silently into the night, the darkness of his coat overpowering the moonlight. In awe, Sojiro watched him leave.
なんか仙人みたいな人だな。
In his own way, Sojiro was expressing affection. For some reason, Father Aries' distant tone made him feel nostalgic. Alice gave Sojiro a deathly stare.
気を許さないで。彼は教会の人間よ。私たちを監視
That's
する
right,
側だ
never
から
trust a Catholic.
今回は彼の手を借りるしかなかっただけ。許されるなら真っ先に消えてほしい人間だから。
Going to Catholic funerals was the worst. They do so many prayers, they have their whole thing set up. They always have an itinerary planned for the whole event. Because the best funerals to go to are the ones where you just show up and they're like, you know, what we didn't really plan this out. What do you guys want to do? That's when we throw out traditionally, the honor guard goes first. So that way, you know, the family can do their whole thing without us just like hovering around, yada yada. But we're just saying that because we just drove 4 hours and we just want to get the fuck out of here and go get lunch. But Catholics would have like the fucking whole thing printed out. And of course, people die all year round, so go stand out in the snow for an hour and a half, not moving, because they're saying their fucking 15th prayer and doing Hail Marys or whatever. Same with Freemasons. They took forever, too. Her curse ringing in the air, Alice placed her hand on the doors to the chapel. They were twice her height, and who knows how heavy. It did not look like she could open them anytime soon. Sojiro climbed the stairs 3 at a time, and helped Alice push the towering doors inward. The dim light of the chapel brought with it the familiar scent of burning oil. The ecclesiastical interior was breathtaking. The tall ceiling, the stained glass windows in every wall. It all felt intended to illustrate the presence of the Holy Spirit within those chambers. Like the foyer in the Kuonji estate, there was not a single heater. The bitter cold made the chapel feel more severe.
Ah-chan, こっちよ.
The gentle voice echoed through the chapel, incongruous to its surroundings. It was the voice of a woman.
リスカさん、奥。
Alice made her way past the rows of pews towards the front altar. Sojiro closed the large doors and hurried after her.
早かったわね。これから迎えに行こうと思ったのに。使える足があったから。後ろの足って、あれ？あなた。
お。
Sojiro showed himself, surprising the woman. They stared intently at each other, wondering what the other was doing here.
知り合い？
Acquainted.
ああ、うん。 まずいことに知り合い。
Yeah, you have some explaining to do, Hanazawa.
宗十郎さん、引っ越したって話だけど、もしかしてあっちゃんのところに下宿してるの？
Sojiro nodded. Alice turned visibly sour at this unexpected development.
どういうこと？しずきくん、律香さんとはどういう関係？関係って、
Oh, well, you know, they both volunteer around the community.
お魚屋さんでしょっちゅう割引してもらったり、荷物持ちを頼んでみたり、たまにお茶飲んだりする主婦の友みたいな。意味がわかりません。律香さん結婚していないでしょ。
It's a vibe. Needless to say, Sojiro was also not a housewife's best friend, and all that suggested. But there were more urgent matters at hand.
うわぁ、そこを突っ込むのか。あっちゃん、私にだけは一切妥協がないのはどうかと思うの。律香さんの場合、どこまで本気かわからないから。おかしなところは全部追求しておかないといけないだけよ。あら素敵。仲のいい姉妹みたいね、私たち。じゃあ、その信頼に応えて本当のこと言うと、彼とは町内会の顔見知りよ。
Yeah.
スパイ行為とかそういうんじゃないし。
It's very
そもそもそん
mundane.
な器用な人じゃないでしょ、宗十郎さんは。本当？
Alice stared straight at Sojiro. To let him know that she was mad at him for hiding this from her. Well, why would he need to tell you?
本当だ。魚屋でバイトしてる時に知り合った人だ。前に親切にしてもらったんで、お礼にイワシを1匹サービスしたら、それ以来ごひいきに。
そうそう。商店街で買い物してれば、嫌でも宗十郎さんと
Pillar
は
of the
顔見知り
community.
になるわ。あっちゃんも怒るぐらいなら買い物に来ればいいのに。密かな商店街のアイドルです、彼。
アイドルとは人気者という意味で、値切りやすいかもって意味じゃないような。
His apparent popularity would have to be questioned another time. Collecting herself, Alice focused on the door to the recesses of the church.
律香さんの事情
Words are
は
hard
知りません
sometimes,
が
man.、
彼は青子の連れです。その他に説明はいりますか？ああ、やっぱりそういうことなのね。ま、言いたいことはいろいろあるけど、今はそれどころじゃないし。ええ、了解したわ。他ならぬあっちゃんの頼みだし、特殊な例だけど、彼はこちらで保護しましょう。
Can't have your inn at the fish market dying, after all. Alice nodded and began walking to the door.
アリス。
ダメよ、宗十郎さん。
As Sojiro was about to follow Alice, Ritsuka stepped in his way.
あなたは行ってはいけません。彼女たちに任せなさい。
Yeah, Aoko's probably in a compromised state, both physically and emotionally right now. Probably doesn't want you fucking gawking at her. Little delicacy is required here. She asserted bluntly. Meanwhile, Alice had reached the door and entered further into the chapel.
行ってはいけないって。どうして？
あなたのためよ。青子の容体は普通の人が見ていいものじゃない。気分を悪くするだけ。
Damn, that bad, huh?
それとも嫌な思いをしてもいいくらい青子が心配なのかしら？
Sojiro was not able to give an immediate answer. It finally hit him just how bad a state Aoko must be in. Based on Alice's condition when he found her, he intuited that Aoko's injuries might be even worse. He tried to imagine her expression in that state, but could not.
青崎相手に心配なんかしません。
Literally, he had never been worried about her before, not truly.
でも会いに行くのね。
はい。
He answered her reflexively. Ritsuka sighed at the boy's naivete, but nevertheless stepped aside.
どうぞ行ってらっしゃい。アリスさんが使ったドアから入って4番目の部屋よ。今一番取り込んでる頃だから、ゆいちゃんの邪魔だけはしないように。
Sojiro thanked her and went after Alice, leaving Ritsuka Suze Suse? Suze? Well, we'll need to hear her full name to get the pronunciation. We'll go with Suse for now. The self-proclaimed everybody's friendly neighbor, alone. I was going to say neighborhood, but I'm like, she's sure not a neighborhood.
さて、ユイカあたりなら止めるんでしょうけど、ま、私は宗十郎さんの味方だし、傷つく男のことは大好物だし。少々スパルタと自覚しておりますが、これも親切な姉心と思って、宗十郎さんには後悔していただきましょう。
Just talking to yourself, huh? She spoke with force, but her words echoed aimlessly around the chapel. With a sigh, she shrugged her shoulders and made the sign of the cross in a rather unpious manner. You can do that unpiously? How? It's a real simple motion. Don't see how it could be done. What? The sound of Sojiro's footsteps grew fainter. Unless it was just kind of like half-heartedly, just kind of like, swipe down, swipe side, instead of doing like the whole fucking thing. His lack of hesitation had left pain in her heart. And not because he did not look back at her, but because he was choosing to ignore the primal fear inside him. An elderly man once said, "An animal's death and a human's are two different things. You may think they are the same, but they differ to their core. Our heads have known the difference since the dawn of man. Animal's corpse, be it pig's or a deer's, is different. If the swing of an axe or a machete is violent, then so must a human corpse be. Therefore, before you see one with your own eyes, you should at least understand it with your ears. Listen closely, Sojiro. When a person dies, blood flows like a crimson river. It's too much to bear. Well, not always. Sometimes they just fall and hit their head. And, sometimes it's not even enough to break the skin, but, just a little brain hemorrhage and... Perhaps because he was not used to the stone path beneath his feet, Sojiro's mind wandered back to the words he'd heard as a child. Blood. The instant he opened the door, there was a palpable change in the air. The room was small, with only a simple bed and a small wooden dresser. And there on the bed, somebody was laying on her side. Tending to her was the woman he had just seen in the chapel, Ritsuka. No, she looked a lot like her. Her eyes were closed, and her garments covered in blood. He had met her maybe once before. Yuika Suse, a nun at the church. She was doing something to the mangled mass resembling Aoko. Yuika held a pair of scissors and some thread. Her hands were moving delicately, yet quickly, as though playing an organ. Her movements were precise, as if flawlessly reading sheet music. One by one, the supply of bandages diminished. Bandages recently applied to the wounds were quickly replaced with fresh ones. Gauze was placed everywhere to try and cope with the amount of blood. Once white cloth was now dyed red and discarded. The dressing scattered around the floor resembled roses. In a wilted rose garden, the nun played her organ. The scene looked unlike any reality Sojiro knew. It was clear why the air had changed. The emphasis on that sentence was odd. I don't know why I read it like that. There was a savage odor in the room. Even though he was experiencing it for the first time, he knew what it was. The smell burned his lungs. He could not bring himself to look at the bed. Fighting his feelings, his eyes refused to move there. He noticed Alice next to the bed. Ever expressionless, she looked like a statue next to her grave. Except she was trembling ever so slightly. Could have been from fear, anxiety, rage, or a combination of the three. Before her lay a life on the verge of death. But whose life? It's difficult to tell only at a glance. Some sort of puppet covered in bandages, perhaps? Her hair should have been beautiful, but it fell flat, disheveled. Despite her short breaths, her chest convulsed. Up, down, up, down. Fastidious though it was, Sojiro recalled the rodeo machine on the roof of the department store. The painkillers and anesthesia could not have been working. New bandages were soaked crimson in seconds. Her fingernails bit into the sheets. Her face twisted in agony. Anesthesia would not be enough, so if she was still alive, she must be conscious too. It worried him that no one seemed concerned about this. Well, if she can feel the pain, it means she's still alive. So, it's good. Good frame of reference to go off of. You know, if she goes stock still, then uh-oh, then we got a bit of an issue here. In this state, she would surely lose her mind before her life. In short, the boy never wanted to see anything like this ever again. Bedsheet should be white, not red. With every blink, the color deepened. Sojiro was finally forced to accept that the bleeding mess in the center of it was her. He felt the blood surge in his veins. The squeaking of the bed, the snip of the scissors, the gasps of agony, it all faded. All he could hear was his own pounding heartbeat. The smell of the blood she choked up sent a wave of nausea through him. His knees abandoned him. And it was perfectly understandable. His brain had shut his consciousness off to protect itself. The mind could only take so much reality. He would give anything to never see something like that again.
そうか。青子ちゃんは全部わかっているんだね。自分だけのことじゃなくて、この後に起きることも、何が残って何が残らないのかも、それでも自分であり続けられるということは、とても強いことなんだよ。
And on she went. I kind of liked her smile, but she just had to go and say one thing I wish she hadn't. The last day of middle school seemed so long ago. As the ephemeral cherry blossom petals danced around, my little dream was crushed. I never really considered myself strong. At least, until I began remembering those words from time to time.
青崎は分かってると思ってた。いや、きっと分かってるんだな。だから、そこが強いんだろうね。
Well, maybe strong-willed or thick-headed might be another term to describe her. And lately, an idiot who said things like that had appeared in my life. I knew I always judged people more harshly than those around me, but to have someone I've only known for a few days point that out was like a stab in the chest. Not only that, the words sounded so similar, it made me so angry I couldn't see straight. Only him and one other person have ever said anything like that to me. Then again, I suppose my sister said the same without actually saying it. You're different from us. But, me being me, I took it as a curse rather than a compliment. My actions, my choices, my morals, all the good and bad I've done. When all said and done, am I really any better than anyone else? Of course I am. I'll never sacrifice myself for those around me. They just... oh god, it's hard to read when the spinning background. It's making me, like, disoriented. They just had to call me strong, true to myself, in spite of how alone, stubborn, and ridiculous I know I can be. When I was younger, it only confused me. I mean, I don't know any other way. I am who I am. The frustrating fact is, I simply don't have the courage to give up. So why? Why do I get treated special for doing what comes naturally? The sunlight stirred her. Maybe it was the pain from having her whole body held together by arcane threads. But Naoko felt like she had a silly dream. She gulped air through her painful, parched throat. Ooh, yeah, and It's like when you get, like, mouth surgery or, like, teeth removed and you get, like, the blood, like, scabbing at the back of your throat. It's great waking up to that taste. Gray rays of light shone through a small window, bringing her back to reality. Yeah, don't scratch at your your sutures. Unable to bear it, Aoko attempted to roll over. Except she could only move her right arm. She tried lifting her arm, but couldn't feel anything past her elbow. Once she stopped concentrating on her bandaged arm, it fell to the bed like a stone. Aoko took in her surroundings, moving only her eyes. Evidently, she had been asleep in this bed. Unable to feel certain parts of her body, she felt like a robot. The room was tiny and undecorated. It's like an apartment without a tenant. Judging by the good repair, she guessed she was in Ida Church. Outside, it seemed closer to noon than morning. Clouds filled the sky as usual, dulling the sun's rays. Idly, she thought it could be enough to melt the snow outside. And then finally, she noticed the figure of a girl. Next to her bed, Alice Kuonji was sitting in a chair, unmoving. She called out to her, all too casually. It was more difficult to talk than she thought. Alice was her typical stoic self, though Aoko did notice a glimpse of concern in her eyes.
寝てないんでしょ。肌が荒れてる。努力はしたわ。けど、瞳子さんに飲まされたものが解毒されるまで眠れそうにないの。半端な痛みは、こういう時に生ぬるいわね。
Alice's uncharacteristically vulgar comment helped Aoko feel a little more like her usual self. Yeah, I was about to say, a little crass. She felt reassured having a comrade in arms by her side instead of a concerned neighbor.
そう、アリスもやられたの。
Oh yeah, you guys got your fucking shit rocked.
状況は大体予想し
Like
てるけど。
absolutely blown out. Wasn't even a
一応
fair
細部を
fight.
聞かせてくれない？
Aoko remained horizontal as she spoke with a cool tone. Despite Aoko's condition, Alice granted her request. After all, they had known each other for 2 years. Alice knew exactly what kind of anesthesia Aoko Ozaki needed right now. Alice Kuonji's battle with Toko Aozaki ended in the former's victory. The Thames Troll was a special familiar even among fairy tale monsters. I almost said Thames again. While lacking the incredible reality warping abilities of Flat Snark, its sheer mass, durability, and strength were second to none. Toko's rune magecraft was rendered completely ineffective by its stone armor. In all fairness to Toko, most mages would not stand a chance against the Bridge Giant. The reason lay in the mystic's body. As a general law of magecraft, a mystic will lose to a stronger, older mystic. The history of the Bridge Giant dated back well over 1,000 years. Its origin could be traced to the 1st century, when Britannia was conquered by the Romans. Conversely, despite having roots dating back to the Age of Gods, runes had unfortunately been lost to time. Rune magecraft was little more than an attempt to revive and use a dead art. However, monsters from fairy tales, like the troll, were different. They lived on in the hands of Alice Kuonji. The magical world was vast, but one could probably count on one hand the number of magecraft that still functioned after being chanted into existence a millennia ago, as Alice's ploys did. In contrast, Toko the rune user was only about 2 decades old. Carving a rune took only a moment. There was no way a quick spell could defeat the personification of London Bridge in Alice's homeland. That being said, a beast had appeared that surpassed even those from fairy tales. Beowulf, the Golden Beast. It seemed absurd to compare a small and relatively powerless wolf to a towering stone giant. The Thames Troll's attacks were earthquaking. A direct hit from its 50-ton strikes would smash anything to paste, while a glancing blow would create mincemeat. And yet, the beast had attacked head-on and torn right through it. The wolf's fur bristled, and the creature metamorphized like liquid. It was a breathtaking display. Wolf howled at the moon as if in joy, and streaked forth like a bolt of golden light. In an instant, the duel was decided, and my throat's parched. The radiant spear of Wolf flew straight through the giant's chest and sank its teeth into its heart. The troll exploded. Chunks of stony muscle rained down. Luminous fur scattered in the wind. Two mystics dispersed without a trace and returned from whence they came. The current fell in a battle straight out of mythology. There, among the rubble of the fairy tale monster, was the golden wolf standing like a flame. What came after could barely be described as a battle. It's more like the slaughter of defeated pawns. The wolf leapt on Alice, disemboweled her with ease. Its claws cut through the protective wards and Alice's coat like a hot knife through butter. The golden wolf, the wolf which understood human speech, could only be the magical creature known as the werewolf. Werewolves were the forest people of Western Europe, with origins far more ancient than the fabricated vampire legends of the continent. However, none were known to have golden coats. Yeah, that's an odd one. It was said that the most elite werewolf bloodlines boasted silver fur. Silver werewolves were pack leaders, and werewolves of that caliber were considered phantasmal, rather than merely mythical creatures, or magical creatures. But a golden werewolf was superior even to that, and so transcended human knowledge. Alice Kuonji's ploy were among the ultimate mystics to have been created by humankind. Therefore, the golden wolf could only have been a mystic born of the planet. Oh, it's an elemental. When a celestial body has been active for millions, even billions of years, occasionally a miraculous droplet of creation spills over into our current world. This mystic had to be over 3,000 years old. A human mage. No, any mage living in the current magical paradigm would be helpless against the golden wolf. Not even in theory would they stand a chance of defeating it. Which means that this werewolf was Aoko and Alice's worst nightmare. Yeah, it's a silver bullet against mages.
アリスがお手上げの相手だものね。私がどうにかできるはずもなかったわけだ。
Just completely conceptually outclassed.
でも、要は魔術でなければいいのよね。テムズの動力は魔力だけど、テムズのパンチは純粋な衝撃でしょ。当たりさえすればぺしゃんこじゃないの。残念だけど、あれ、基本は狼の姿なだけで、状況によって形を変えるわ。
Ooh,
テムズ
cool.
の腕を受け止めた時は大猿みたいになっていたし、機関銃やロケットで狙ってもかわされるか体の硬い生き物に変化して防ぐんじゃないかしら。地球上の生き物なら何にでも変われるってことか。でもまあ質量までは無理かな。基本は2メートル台の生物のいいとこ取りってあたりで勘弁してほしいわね。ねえ、すごく関係ないけど、深海の生き物に変わられたらちょっと怖いと思わない？
What, like a whale? Aoko narrowed her eyes as she bemoaned the creature's existence. Conversation had appeared to have revived her fighting spirit. Once again, her eyes were focused, and her thoughts clear. Aoko was back to her usual self.
で、その後はアリスうまく逃げられたの？
Well, she's here. Unless she escaped and more she just survived.
いいえ、私もあの狼にやられたわ。
Phrasing. Alice explained how the wolf pinned her to the ground. Incidentally, she kept the part about Sojiro rather short. Alice herself was not entirely sure why she felt it necessary to leave most of that information out.
アリスが相手をした後、休む間もなく私のところに来たわけか。初めから昨日で決着をつけるつもりだったんだ、姉貴。姉妹かな。ここぞって時のタイミングは一緒だったの忘れてた。切り札は見せたからには敵を殲滅しなくちゃいけない。
Yup.
姉貴は視点を残り2つにしておいて、自分の正体を告げてこっちの戦力を分けさせた。その時点で奥の手を投入してくることは覚悟してたけど、まさか人狼なんて極物とはね。
Yeah, to be fair, rather unexpected development. Can't blame you for that one. Alco let out a heavy sigh. Alice nodded slightly in agreement.
それはそれとして、宗十郎がアリスを助けに行くなんてね。感謝しなくちゃいけないんだろうけど、バカな真似してくれたわ。私が東子の立場なら、報復の可能性は一つ残らず排除する。私たちがどうにかなった後、猫の手首ひねるみたいに片付けられるわよ。
I mean, the fact that you're both still alive is, you know, a little bit of a head scratcher, because, you know, if she really wanted to, she could have just been bop, 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 got all you three done and just win right there, but, you know.
しずきくんならこちらで保護してもらってるけど。
Aqua's eyes widened.
うわ、どういう風の吹き回し？アリスがあいつの世話を焼くなんて。だって放っておいたら青子が怒ると思って。
Yeah, don't want your sister breaking your things, now do you? Alice responded with her eyes closed. Alco frowned in silent indignation. Oh my god, words. What did I say? Why did I say frowned? Just fucking swap those letters around, why don't I? As if she wanted to protest where Alice got that idea from.
まあいいけど、それじゃあ今ここにいるんだ、宗十郎。姿が見えないけどどうしたの？
I don't know, he's probably like shoveling the stairs or something. Still unable to move her neck, she looked around as best she could.
彼なら気分を悪くして倒れたわ。今はエイリ神父の寝室を借りているけど。
Alco furrowed her brow at collapsed. Sure, he was under the church's protection, but had Toko set the wheels in motion for his death?
何があったの？一体。
He saw you looking like hamburger meat and just fucking went, nope. Alice paused for a moment before carefully answering the question.
それが彼、あなたを見て嘔吐したの。
Fair. She had decided to be blunt. Alco was taken aback. For several seconds, dim sunlight leaked through the window. Once she had found her voice again, she muttered.
いいけど、ひどい侮辱よね、それって。
Well, to be fair, more of your outsides, you know, more of your insides were on the outside than, you know, your normal outside bits, so. Perhaps amused, or perhaps exhausted from staying up all night, Alice cracked a tiny giggle.
何よ、そんなにおかしい、アリス。さあ、どうかしらね。けど、しずきくんにも言い分はあるでしょう。
Yeah, I've seen some gruesome things in
とても見られたものじゃないわ。
in my annual training because, you know, we work around heavy equipment and like airplanes. I've seen the aftermath of people being ingested into inlets. Someone over pressurizing a tire and getting fucking blown in half when it exploded. Yeah. Icky inside bits. They're not fun to look at. Though, I am from the generation that grew up on the internet, so seeing, like, horrible gore and murder doesn't surprise me too often. It has to be particularly heinous in order to get a visceral reaction. Alco appraised her physical state. She was dressed in a hospital gown. Bandages covered the majority of her body. Her right leg was in a plaster cast. Since she could move her right arm, she brought her bandaged fingers to her throat.
そっか、思い出した。あのガキ、まず私の首元に噛みついたんだっけ。すごかったわよ、首が噛み砕かれるの。
Ugh.
ゴキンって音が頭の中に響いて、気持ち悪いったらなかったわ。ち、あそこから好き勝手やられたもんだから、つい忘れてた。
Akko sounded upbeat, but the look in her eyes was anything but. She'd been torn to pieces, but her life had been mercifully spared. At least she hadn't been dismembered. She had been bitten, beaten, and her bones broken. Magic crests containing the Aozaki's secret arts decorated her body. Even if her spine was broken, as long as her body was alive, the crest would piece it back together. Despite the crest easing the pain a little, she still hurt enough to want to kill that wolf 100 times over.
視点は全部壊された。これで三崎市の霊脈はフリーってわけね。全容を把握してるのはうちらだけの特権だったけど、東子は昔から知ってる以上、解析の手間もいらないと。真剣な話、所有権の書き換えまで何時間かかると思う？東子さんなら2日かからないでしょうね。
Welp.
支店の修復は土地そのものに任せるしかない。支店のプロテクトが治る頃には、この町はもう彼女のものよ。明日の夜明けとともに破産する我が身とはね。それでアリスの方はどうなの？まだいける？思考魔術だけなら少しは。あとは小道具に頼ることになるでしょうね。ああ、お話にならないか。
Kind of a rough situation you guys are in here. Alko went silent again, staring straight at the ceiling. Alice knew all too well what that look meant.
それでもやるんでしょ、青子は。まあね、私諦めるのってできないから。で、そういうアリスはどうなのよ。私は一度自分のものになったものは、決して
Alko muttered an agreement to Alice's terse response. Alice's intense attachment to her possessions was enough to make even Alko shiver. Once something is mine, it stays mine. To take it a step further, betrayal was an unforgivable sin. This personal motto was further proof of her uncompromising nature.
OK、決まりね。じゃ、悪いけどもう少し休ませて。今晩までには何とか動けるようにするから。
You sure about that? If the nun who stitched her back together had heard that, she would have fainted. Alko could barely even eat in her current condition. Even so, Alice nodded and stood up. As Alko's partner, she knew that once her mind was made up, she had to trust her. Silently, the girl in black began to take her leave. She stopped in front of the door, her hand to her mouth.
Alice?
Alko was curious, suspecting that Alice had something silly to say again. Quite the contrary. Instead of blushing, Alice furrowed her brow like she was thinking over a difficult riddle.
Alice?
Alko called out, but Alice remained with her back to her roommate.
なんで間に合ったのかしら。
She spoke as if the words had accidentally burst out from her thoughts. Well, yeah, you know, just a little bit of a warp space-time, you know. Just boop, popped right over. Either that or Toko just lied about the time limit. Alice's question was about something Alko could not possibly have guessed.
あの時もそう。私たち始発で帰ってきたのに。
She carried on mumbling at the door. Unable to find an answer, Alice gloomily put her hand on the doorknob.
言いたくないなら別にいいけど。何がどうしたっていうのよ、アリス。
Alice did not respond. She opened the door to leave the room and left a few words hanging in the air.
どうでもいいことだけど、ゆいかさんにはしずきくんは見えなかったそうよ、青子。
Like at all? The door closed with a thud.
そりゃまた珍しい。
Alko mumbled to herself from her bed, seeming slightly happier. Blind since birth, Yuika Suze saw the world through her other senses. She was especially sensitive to enemies, or those who bore ill will, and typically viewed almost everyone as a threat, presumably because that was the easiest thing to pick up on. So when she said she couldn't see Sojiro, that meant he was completely harmless. And then, that harmless individual decided to pay the small sick room a visit. Sojiro looked like a stiff breeze could knock him over. Made Alko wonder who the real patient was.
何しに来たの、あんた。
Yeah, good to see you too. Though Alko could barely move, she was still able to give him the cold shoulder. His expression gaunt, Sojiro grunted something or other, before beginning to speak more coherently.
アリスが客間で眠ったから礼拝堂にいたんだけど、人が集まりだしたんで、こっちに逃げてきた。
Yeah, Christmas Mass.
あ、礼拝の時間か。クリスマスだってのによくやるわ。
It was indeed Christmas, but regular Mass was on Christmas Eve. The ones gathering in the chapel must have been truly devout followers. Tourists were rare in Misaki, after all. So much so that almost no one visited this area this time of year. The worshippers must have been locals.
それで別にどうってことないでしょ。探せば顔見知りもいるんじゃない？
Yeah, but it's being around for service when like you're not actually like religious. It's kind of like I don't feel like, you know, it doesn't feel like you shouldn't be there, but it's just kind of like it feels a little disingenuous. So it's like I'm gonna step out. Alko was as distant as ever. She clearly had not forgotten the fact that he had vomited when he saw her, and a hint of spite leaked into her voice. Then again,
いや、ちょうどいい機会だから、いろいろと聞きたくなって。少し話をしていいかな。
since Alko was always in a bad mood, Sojiro did not pick up on anything out of the ordinary. She wanted to tell him to go drink some water because he looked ready to collapse, but he didn't seem aware of his own condition. And to be fair to him, Alice did say Alko was in bad shape. Given how unaccustomed to blood Sojiro was, it's no wonder he had fainted.
ああ、そうか。話なんてまだ無理だな。すまない。出直してくれ。
Sojiro seemed to have misunderstood Alko being deep in thought as not having enough stamina to speak. Naturally, this did not sit well with Alko.
待ちなさいよ。
Also, God, that's the fucking thinnest mattress I've seen in the world.
やる
Jesus
気も手余
Christ.
してるし、暇つぶしがてらに相手してあげるわよ。
It's more like a mat, a mattress.
ま、退屈しのぎにしてはちょっとグレード下がるけど、この際贅沢言ってられないし。
Sojiro sensed this was going to be rough, but took a seat on the chair next to the bed.
何が聞きたいの？
Alko spoke energetically in an attempt to distract from her weakened appearance. Naturally, she knew she was fooling no one.
やっぱり青崎は強いな。 安心した。
More just stubborn. Sojiro said, nodding in admiration. Alko shot him an unimpressed look in response to the unwanted praise.
あんたってほんと間が悪いわ。いいわよ、別に。私の夢の話だから、そっちが気に病むことは。
What does that mean? She glowered, remembering. Come to think of it, almost everyone in her dream was here in the church, turning her dour expression into an irritated one.
やめやめ、こんなつまんない話。聞きたいことがあるなら手っ取り早く済ませちゃってよ、宗十郎。
よかった。じゃあまず今の状況を聞かせてくれないか。
Yeah, give us the full rundown.
トウコさんの話じゃ俺も無関係じゃないそうだし。
Sojiro spoke calmly, making Aoko wonder if he really understood the gravity of his situation. He was Toko's enemy now. He was defenseless and needed protection. Neither Aoko nor Alice could help him, and the church could withdraw their sanctuary at any moment. He had picked a side, and that had turned him from innocent bystander into target. The answer he sought was as simple as that. He knew the facts, but not a mage and was therefore powerless.
まあそれでもアリスは助けられたわけだし。
Gotta give him the carrot every now and again instead of the stick. Aoko did owe him for that. To say thanks, she decided to at least give him the whole story up until now.
よし、今までの経緯も含めて軽く説明してみましょうか。私も何か得るものがあるかもしれないし。
Aoko composed herself before beginning her explanation. The battle began at the end of November. A lot had happened since then, including meeting Sojiro.
事の起こりは1ヶ月前、三崎市に貼られた結界の端っこが何者かに消されたのが発端だった。私が跡継ぎになってから5度目の三崎市を狙う敵の登場ってわけ。今回の敵は私たちとは直接戦わず、まず土地を奪うところから始めたわ。今までのやつは私たちを半人前と舐めていたから、大抵は真正面から仕掛けてきて、勝手にアリスの猟犬の餌食になったんだけど、町の結界には2種類あって、侵入者を見つけるものと土地の力を有効利用するものがあるの。敵が壊したのは土地の結界の方で、これが全部壊されると私やアリスは土地の所有権を失ってし
Yep,
まう。
proved you can't protect it, so you don't have the, the rights to own it anymore.
土地のないはぐれ魔術師と同じになっちゃうのよ。もちろんそうならないように侵入者をあぶり出すための結界があるんだけど、こっちには何の反応もなかった。ま、当然よね。今回の敵は私の姉貴青崎塔子その人だったんだから。青崎の結界は同族である姉貴を敵とみなさなかった。あるいは姉貴は結界の抜け道、構造の資格をついたのかもしれない。もともとうちの後継者はあの人だし、それぐらいの知識はあったでしょう。
A little bit of A and B, probably.
そうして姉貴は私たちに見つかることなく好き勝手に結界の視点を壊し始めた。時間をかけてゆっくり壊していったのは外からやってきた部外者を演じていたからでしょうね。さすがに連続して壊されればこっちも身内の犯行だと疑うし、
Someone who knew where they were,
親戚で
instead
あ
of,
る浅木
having
家とは
to
仲悪い
snoop
もの
around
で
a
す
little
さ。
bit.
姉貴の芝居に騙された私たちが間抜けなんだけど、セオリーとして結界崩しは長丁場になるものなの。管理地の結界は強固に作られているからね。普通は半年単位での攻防になる。攻める側はまず結界を形取る視点が何個あるか、それがどの5大要素でくくられているか、退去の正しい順序はどれか、それらを地道に解き明かしていく。もちろん管理地の魔術師たちの目を盗みながら。
Uh-huh.
対して守る側は侵入者がいることに気づくから、悪さをされる前に敵の拠点を見つけ出して外敵を排除する。こんな感じで結界崩しは長期戦、あるいは前哨戦になるものなの。大抵は攻める側が視点を壊すぞとアピールして土地の持ち主を翻弄疲弊させてから魔術師同士の直接対決で決着がつくわ。
Yeah, but who would, challenge someone to a duel when they could get shot, when you can just, shoot them in the back instead when they're not looking,
なんで
when they don't even know you're
結界
there?
を全部壊す必要はないのよ。管理地の持ち主を始末した方が早いし、その後は術式さえ解読しちゃえば土地を結界ごと横取りできる。わざわざ壊して作り直すより昔からある結界の方が土地に馴染んでいて強力だしで一石二鳥でしょ。
So just bop the owner and then fucking sit around until squatters' rights kick in? That was how Aoko and Alice were duped. I never thought the enemy would waste the time and effort needed to break all the sigils.
だから私とアリスはとりあえず受けに回った。
視点を探すために町を調査している敵を待ち伏せてこれを片っ端から倒そうって。でもそのうちの一つがケチのつき始めだった。三崎町の公園で山張って待ち受けていた時、どうでもいい第三者が覗き見してやがったのよ。
Indeed. It was the ultimate taboo in the world of magecraft. The existence of mages must never be revealed to
その
outsiders.
後のことはわかるでしょ。私は敵との小競り合いをアリスに任せて、それより重要な目撃者狩りに専念せざるを得なくなった。言っとくけど、これはあんたのことだからね。そこで我関せずみたいな顔しないこと。
What a shocking revelation. No sooner had Aoko said this, Sojiro gave her that exact look. Clearly, he had been listening, but not necessarily understanding.
ま、いいけどね。宗十郎がそんなだから秘密は漏れなかったんだし。で、あんたっていう目撃者を消そうとした私の単独行動は敵にしても都合のいいものだった。強敵であるアリスがいないんだから、敵はこれを機会に私を始末しようと特注品の人形を差し向けたと思っていたけど、あれはただの嫌がらせね、間違いなく。
Yeah, she just fucked with you because she thought it was funny.
そうでなきゃ私そっくりの人形なんて派遣するかっての。
Sojiro nodded, thinking back to the Aoko replica.
あれのことは忘れてちょうだい。
Yeah, it was a rather poor
そ
showing.
こから先はあんたもうすうす知ってるでしょ。私とアリスは敵との戦いに専念することになって、毎日のように捜査の手を空振って決戦の夜を迎えて、今はこうしてる。大体の経緯はこんなところよ。
She stared down at her body, as if recalling what had happened would help her accept her current state. Under the sheet, magical energy steadily flowed through her partially bandaged body.
青崎、これまでの君たちの話は分かった。
You sure?
けど、肝心の今の状況はどうなっているんだ。
So many S's there. Sojiro's specific concern was the reason Aoko was lying there. More than anything, he wanted to know what had happened to her the night before.
バカね。状況も何も完全に私たちの負けじゃない。
Yes, but how and why? Judging by her tone, she would have raised both hands sarcastically in celebration if she could.
負けた？
事実は正しく受け止めなくっちゃね。5つの視点が全部壊された時点で勝負はついたの。管理地の所有権は宙ぶらりで、明日にはトウコの手に渡るでしょう。で、それを阻止したいこっちは、私もアリスもこのありさま。もう立場は逆転したから、これから私たちは挑戦者。つまり、はぐれ魔術師ってことよ。
Well, you know, everyone loves an underdog story. Which meant that Aoko, Alice, and Sojiro only had a few more days with which to utilize the church's services. Ada Church was not only an arm of the words. Ada Church was not an arm of the Mages Association, but also a branch of the Holy Church that monitored heresy. Aoko and Alice were owners of Misaki City's spiritual land, but they belonged to neither of these organizations. The only reason the church helped them at all was because they were the land's administrator. Once those rights were lost, the church would have no reason to provide any further
エリ
aid.
神父はコウモリだから私を助けてくれたけど、
Oh,
ユイカさんは教会の代行者だから、傷が塞がったなら明日にでも出ていけって言ってくる。
well, that tracks.
教会にとっちゃ魔術師なんてもともと排除すべき商売敵だからね。バカリつかはま、泣きつけば力にはなってくれるでしょうけど。
Sojiro understood little of what Aoko was talking about.
そうじゃなくて、青崎、昨日の夜、何があったんだ？
Yeah, the how and why. It's alright, you got your ass kicked. Cool, time for your lessons learned. Sojiro pressed her and Alco really wished he had not.
見てわからない。惨敗なんてものじゃないわ。
Yes, but we need to get into the nitty gritty.
喉に食いつかれる。体中好き放題噛まれまくる。アリスのチョコレートのおかげで出血死は免れたけど。
She knocked on the cast around her leg. Alco spoke casually, but she was trying to hide how much she wanted revenge for being humiliated. In contrast, Sojiro felt empty. The little color he had on his face began to fade. Was he repulsed by the terrible situation, or were his instincts telling him to flee? Regardless, he appeared very human.
なんでそこで固まる？あ、そっか。私を見て吐き出しちゃうぐらいナイーブなんだっけ、ソジローってば。大丈夫よ、今はくっついてるから。ユイカさんは治療専門だし、私だってただやられてたわけじゃないし。
Oh, you're like a
復元は青
starfish.
崎の得意分野だから、あれくらい問題ないわ。
She gave him a reassuring look, but his expression was unchanged. Alco had expected him to worry, but this level of concern made it hard for even her to berate him. Feeling embarrassed, she started talking again.
けど姉切ったら、どうやってあんなのを手なずけたんだろう。金の狼なんて伝説の中にしかいないと思ってた。寝台の神秘であるあいつには千年クラスの魔術じゃないと太刀打ちできない。かといって殴り合いでどうにかできる相手じゃないし。
I don't know, feed him some fucking chocolate-covered grapes or whatever and just watch him keel over. As images of the night before entered Alco's mind, she bit her lip in anguish.
金の狼
Conversely, the bizarre phrase snapped Sojiro out of his state of shock.
そう、黄金の人狼。金狼って言った方がいいのかな。狼男って言ってもわからないわよね。人間と狼のいいとこ取りみたいなやつと思えばいいわ。野獣というより魔獣の類よ。普通の人狼なら対抗手段はあるんだけど、トウコが連れてるのは黄金の毛並みをした怪
Yeah,
物
it
で
seemed
さ。
to be a bit of a unique case.
あれは原初の人狼の血統で魔獣を通り越して幻獣の域に達している。聖域の相手にはそいつらを上回る神秘、積み重ねた時間とか魔術の奥義じゃないと無効化されるのよ。魔術は万能だけど、この年月の差だけは覆せない。ま、人間の魔術師にとっては天敵みたいな自然災害ね。
Words indicated more admiration than hatred. The way she'd whispered about the wolf, strangely, made sense to Sojiro.
何？
いや、要するに青崎たちじゃかなわない相手なんだな。
Well, you know, like I said, it's like a force of nature. It's like you can't beat a fucking tornado with your fists.
アリスはお腹が裂かれてた。青崎は傷ついてないところはないぐらいだ。子供なのに。いや、子供だから加減がないのか。
Sojiro's face was a ghostly pale as he muttered nervously. Alco merely nodded in agreement.
ほんと。人の体を何だと思っているのかしらね。あのお子さん。なぬ？
Alco raised her head. She looked as if she had seen a ghost.
子供って言った？あんた、なんでそんなことまで知ってるの？
やっぱりそうなのか。金色の髪なんて二人もいないと思ったんだ。そいつなら一度見かけたことがある。
Oh, are you acquainted with human Beowulf?
青崎が口にしたような怪物じゃなかったけど、森の奥で。木の実が二人がかりで
Oh, yeah, the fucking
なんて怖いこと言
schoolhouse.
い出してさ。金一個ないから止めたんだよ。
His tone was as curious as the things he was trying to articulate. Alco, however, had more pressing matters. Much more pressing.
見たってどこで？
学校の旧校舎。あ、 そういえば挨拶程度なら話もしたっけ。一度だけアルバイトの時に牛肉50キロを生で届けたことがあって。
Oh, well.
この大バ
Well, now you know where fucking Toko's hideout is. A strangely satisfying slapping sound rang out. Ignoring her wounds completely, Algo had grabbed a slipper and thrown it at Sojiro's unassuming face as hard as she could. Algo's part Hispanic? She panted as Sojiro was knocked completely out of his chair. For a while, neither moved.
なんで怒るんだ、青崎。
The boy asked, unfazed, as he slowly picked himself up. He sat cross-legged, as Aoko scowled at him like an enemy.
当たり前じゃない。
Well, how was he supposed to know that, random blonde kid was a fucking enemy werewolf?
なんでそんな怪しいこと黙ってんのよ、あんたは。
Though the 50 pounds of ground beef is a little...
君たちにこんな話をしても怒られるだけじゃないか。
Slightly suspect, but, my guy's new. He doesn't know how much, people are ordering. Maybe they had, a catering event and they needed to cook up a bunch of stuff. Alko knew he was right, so she swallowed her words. She imagined themselves at dinner.
ところで今日、牛肉の山を担いで届けたんだ。一匹丸ごと。いや、あるところにはあるものだね。お金と。
If he had actually said that, Alko and Alice's response would have been less than cordial.
それはそうだけど、本当に金髪の子供が旧校舎にいたの？
それが青崎の言う人狼かどうか自信はないけど。
Well, at least you got a lead to go off of.
少なくとも町中の料理店が入れ替わりでおかしな注文を届けてるのは事実だ。駅前の。
確かに食事のたびにあいつを外に出してちゃ目立つだろうけど。
I mean, you could just put on a hat. She did not want to believe it, but the child had to be the werewolf. Could Toko really have been so careless as to hide him in plain sight? It didn't matter at this point. With the werewolf's habits revealed, Toko's base had been revealed too. To take over the bounded field, she needed an inconspicuous place to store materials. Misaki High School's old school building was the perfect place.
つまり、すべての鍵はあんたが隠し持ってたってわけね。
I mean, he didn't mean to.
隠していたんじゃない。だいたい青崎が裏山の掃除に参加していたら、その時に分かったんじゃないか。飛び丸一人に任せず、
Fair.
青崎も掃除に出ればよかったんだ。
No one to blame but yourself. In response to Sojiro's infallible logic, Aoko snapped her fingers. Yeah, you're right, but I don't like you saying it. Instead of another slipper missile, she let the fateful white collar express how she felt. And, with the tightening of the collar, Sojiro realized something. Aoko had changed. From the bed, she looked down on him with a commanding glare. Though weak from her injuries, she was as sharp as ever. You would be forgiven for forgetting she was ever a patient. She was raring to fight. It went without saying who her rage was directed at.
青崎。
Aoko responded in a vulnerable tone. Perhaps she had been taken by surprise. Now she had an objective. She had been lost in her own little world.
ありがとう、宗十郎。
He expected her to be sarcastic, but this was different. She was genuinely thanking him. He'd never known her to be like this and was taken aback.
あのね、とにかくトウコの居場所が分かったのはあんたのおかげだから、礼ぐらい言っておこうと思ったの。それがお気に召さなかった？
いや、お礼を言ってもらえるのはいいことだけど。
We could do without the choking.
まさか、その体でトウコさんのところに行くつもりか。
His tone was closer to scolding than sympathetic. Aoko simply nodded and resolutely.
取られたものは取り返すものよ、宗十郎。それもすぐに相手のものになってしまう前にね。
ぐず
She sounded unshakable. Even so, Sojiro would not back down.
勝ち目がなくてもか。暇はないと言うけど、今はそれ以上に休息が必要だろう。その傷だって今は見れるけど、昨日はひどかったじゃないか。
違うわ。あれは幸運なんかじゃない。
Mm-hmm.
そんな玉かっていうのよ、トーコは。
I mean, she clearly let you go.
幸運じゃない。
そう。トーコはね、私が生き残れる程度の傷にとどめたのよ。今回は見逃してやるから、もう一度やってこいって意味でね。だから私は生きてるんだし、トーコは私が行くのを待ってる。お互い嫌だけど、あんたの言葉を借りるならね。
Irritation tainted Aoko's words. From the side, she looked terrifyingly serious. She was ready to fight to the death. Toko had given her little choice. Sojiro could understand neither sister.
殺すために生かしたっていうのか、トウコさんは。青崎はそれが分かっているのに行こうとしている。
そうよ。勝負はついたけど、
Yeah, just gotta go and
まだ
deny
私
her
た
that
ちの話は終わ
satisfaction.
っていないもの。確かに全開してから行った方がいいに決まってる。けど、そうしている間にトウコは岬の深部にたどり着く。そうなったら、私の最後の切り札さえ使えなくなる。自分にできることを自分からなくしてしまうのは。
Though the pain in her azure eyes was not as deep as the pain of death, it spoke of the regret she would feel if she did not do everything possible while blood still flowed through her veins.
納得いったのなら黙ってて。いい。これは私の戦い。あんたには何の責任も関わりもない。私の人生なの。座して死を待つなんてまっぴらごめんよ。勝つ気があるなら、いつまでもベッドで寝てるわけにはいかないでしょ。
Sodor was dumbstruck. Aku could never let anyone else get involved. Whether that was because she cared or cared less, he could not know. I mean, he could not tell. What he did understand, though, was that if he wanted to stop her, he would have to do so with his bare hands. And he knew better than to try that. I mean, in her current state, you might have a fighting chance. Even so, he had to ask one last question. If he did not, he would not be able to live with himself after leaving this room.
わからないな。青崎はなんでそこまでするのか。俺には想像もできない。
Yeah, it's sibling things.
君を縛っているのは義務と強制。どっちなんだろうね。
There was sadness in his eyes. However, Aku was unmoved by them.
らしくなく難しいこと聞いてくるのね。いいわ。口にしても仕方のないことだけど答えてあげる。その2つはね、常に私を圧迫してるものだと思う。けど勘違いはしないで。義務も強制も誇りも恐れも周りから与えられたものじゃない。トウコと戦うのをやめたところで祖父は私を叱らないだろうし、アリスも文句は言わないでしょう。ここで逃げてもそれはそれで誰にとってもどうでもいい話になって終わるだけ。本当に意味なんてないのよ、何にだって。でも私はトウコから逃げたりしない。これはただのここにいるっていう存在証明なの。私は単に意味がないからこそできることは全部やるって決めただけなんだから。
Yep, world of blank canvas. With fiery passion, Aoko Ozaki had said her piece. Sodor was left with a pang in his chest. He did not know why, but her words angered him. Then again, at the same time, her self-confidence had him in wonder. Even though she had said her life had no meaning, her stubbornness gave meaning to
じ
everything.
ゃあ、それがたとえ
Without thinking, he started to ask another question. Maybe he wanted to change her mind. Maybe he just wanted to hear her
たと
answer.
え他の誰も見ていなかったとしても。
It came out as a murmur. Indeed, if no one was watching, no one could know that she had fled. This was the situation Aoko was in. Even so, she shut him down instantly.
あら、 見てるわよ。少なくとも私自身がね。
Her expression brightened, possibly because she had been surprised by having to state the obvious. Sojiro was wide-eyed in shock, but Aoko remained nonchalant.
知らないの、宗十郎。生きてく上で一番の観客っていうのはね、他ならぬ自分自身なのよ。だから人生っていうのは油断ならないんじゃない。
Sojiro did not respond to her somewhat exasperated tone, but simply rose to his feet. He looked defeated, which was not like him at all.
宗十郎、
すまない。君が素晴らしいことを言っているのはわかるんだ。けど、俺にはわからない。
What, you just not have like inner conscience that tells you, you know, like scrutinizes yourself? He meekly walked to the door. As he placed his hand on the doorknob, he paused. For a few seconds, he fought with himself, desperately trying to think of something to say. No words came forth, and so he opened the door, which swung with a strange creak, and he left the room. After watching him go, Aoko turned her gaze towards the window. It was nearly evening. A thin veil of darkness was threatening to descend on the town outside. And with that little heart-to-heart done, that is where we're going to end it here for today. I was going to say, it's a little shorter than normal, but, you know, almost hour 45, that's a good length. That's a good length. It's just that these chapters are really long, and, I still need to eat dinner before I go to work. So, once again, this is where we're ending here for today. Once again, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell. See you all next time for the next episode of MiHoYo, where maybe we'll eventually get around to the rematch. Probably not. There's got to be a little more prep time involved. So we'll deal with that later. Catch you guys. Bye. I was going to say catch you later, but then I said I'd deal with that later. So I felt like I would have been saying later too much, and it would have just sounded odd, so I didn't. But then I realized it sounded even more odd. So, yeah, bye.